about double tonguing. This is the very recognizable and iconic Mozart Concerto number 2 in D major. Many flute players have this as kind of a fundamental piece that they kind of have to, like sort of like a rite of passage. You have to perform this at least once, and a lot of professional flute players will actually memorize this because it's so common in our repertoire. So as far as double tonguing, I picked this piece to kind of apply our double tonguing studies to, because it's very important to have that kind of as a tool in your toolbox when you go into pieces like this. It's a faster tempo, so having the ability to double tongue clearly and efficiently throughout this piece is very important, because there are some parts where maybe it's better to single tongue, maybe it's better to double tongue, depending on your abilities and also the context of the piece as well. So I picked that excerpt at the very beginning because it does have quite a few places where there are 2 16th notes slurred together, and then there's maybe after that there are 2 staccatos, da 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 da. It's kind of the repetitive rhythm and articulation pattern that you'll see throughout this piece. So hopefully you got to hear that and the double tonguing that I was using throughout this excerpt. It's possible to single tongue this, but it's obviously not preferable. Speaking from my own personal experience, I would not be able to single tongue this as clearly and as fast as I can with double tonguing, and that has come with a lot of practice with double tonguing. For beginners, what you want to start with is really just finding that placement in your mouth where your tongue is going to go. So a lot of there are actually a couple different ways you can think of double tonguing depending on the articulation pattern you kind of want to create. You can either think doo-goo, 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 you can think tiki, 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 and that can, choosing one or the other can kind of be informed by what you're playing and how legato you want those notes to run together, or if it's something more staccato. For this specifically, there are staccatos written in this, and Mozart wanted them there, so that's how I'm playing them. So I'm thinking more tiki, tiki, tiki versus tuku, tuku, or doo-goo, doo-goo, or la-di-da-da, whatever you want to think of double tonguing as. But I've always kind of thought of tiki, tiki just to make it as clear and crisp as possible. There are some places where that won't apply, but here specifically it does. So the placement in your mouth, you're going to think of that first consonant, whatever you're thinking of. For me, it's T. T is right where my tongue is going to be on the first attack. And then on the second attack, it's in a similar way to how you would say T-key, T-key. T is in the front, key is in the back. So you'll notice if you just go ka, 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 where your tongue is hitting the roof of your mouth towards the back is right where it's going to land for that second articulation. So T, key, T, key. Notice how your tongue moves as you do that. And then you could even say it into your flute. And then just go back and forth, activating your vocal cords and not activating your vocal cords. Nothing should change with your tongue placement. It's just a matter of whether you're actually making a sound or not with your voice versus the flute. It should be the same coming out of your flute every time, because I'm using the same air and my tongue is doing the same thing. And that's what you want to work towards, is just quickening that process. Start slow, T, key, key, just like we just did. And then work with a metronome, go a little bit faster. Tiki, 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 taking it to 16th notes, and then from 16th notes to 32nd notes. So tiki, 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 tiki. And then with your flute, it would look like this. And use that metronome to really ground you and make sure that those articulations are even, because sometimes you'll find, especially when you're just starting out, that the first articulation is more clear and harder than the back one. So it's more like T, key, T, key, T, key, and then the rhythm gets kind of messed up. So keeping your practice with that metronome is going to keep you consistent and working towards a very efficient and even articulation pattern. And then you get to apply it to things like this, like Mozart, and it's more fun. So once again, I think I'm going to just play a little part of this here where you can really hear that. So I'm slurring the first two notes and I'm articulating the back two notes. There are a lot of resources in the flute world. Trevor Y is a great example. He has 6 practice books for flute within one, worth the financial investment. That book can be used through your entire flute career, whether a beginner, intermediate, advanced level, and beyond. There are some core studies in there that you'll never be done with them. So I definitely recommend that book. There are some studies in there for double tonguing, and those will help you kind of build up to this kind of level and take you through a lot of different exercises where you're changing up the articulation patterns. So for this specifically, we're doing 2 slurred 16th notes and 2 staccato 16th notes, all within a 4-note 16th note figure. So ta 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 ta, or ta ta ka ta ta ka, like that. T key, however you want to think of it, as long as your tongue is in the same place every time. Now, the studies that he will give you in those books will mix up those articulation patterns, so it makes you even more on your feet and kind of mixing in those things. So it's, all 4 are staccato, or maybe the middle 2 are slurred and the other 2 are staccato, or maybe the reverse of this, the first 2 are staccato, the last 2 are slurred. So those types of exercises where you're mixing up things as much as possible and kind of playing them frontwards, backwards, inside out, that's what's going to make you better. So I would strongly encourage you to take a metronome, gut out those frustrations and just work really hard on that, because that's what's going to pay off and lead you to be much more efficient. So funny enough, Trevor Y actually was the one to edit this version of Mozart's Concerto in D that I'm playing. So something else I want to talk about when it comes to efficiency and double tonguing is, in the same way we keep our fingers close to our flute in order to be efficient with fingering, to avoid things like little blips that might come up, we want to keep our tongue as close to the roof of our mouth as possible. So if you think about it, if this were my tongue, every time I'm striking forward in a single tongue, that's when I'm actually playing a note. If you cut that in half by making it not just one tongue every time, but you're actually hitting another note on the back end every time your tongue comes back, ta ka ta ka ta ka versus just ta 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 ta, is more efficient because you're getting more notes in faster. So that's the goal here, and in order to do that, you really have to build up the tongue muscle so it gets used to that movement.